Very pleased, though, to welcome back to the show Mark Leibovit. Mark has been Investors Timers Digest long-term investor of the year, short-term, not of the year, of the decade, by the way, short-term bond market timer of the year, gold market timer of the year. It's a heck of a list. Mark, thanks for taking time with us on the show.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You know, every time there's a big thing right now going on in Vancouver about, the whole country, it's the legalization of marijuana. But in Vancouver, the deadline about having sort of an illegal shop that did not have city licensing, etc., was on Friday. And every time I hear stuff about this, I think of you, the person who brought this to the World Outlook Conference, literally before it was on any investor's radar that I was aware of, talking about the opportunities that were going to come. At that point, it was just the thought of legalization of marijuana. It hadn't quite happened. You were telling us it was about to happen in a couple of U.S. states, but the point was there's going to be an opportunity there, and that begat sort of the Vice newsletter. And as I say, Mark, I think of you every time I hear one of those news stories, because thanks to you, we were first with talking about that. Where's that industry now? I'm talking as an investor. We're not going to judge whether that should happen, not happen. Leave that aside. It's a political thing. But what about as an investment thing?
Still fabulous, Mike. You know, there's a lot of pending legislation, a lot of things going on here in the U.S. Of course, you know what's going on in Canada. You know, recreational approval nationwide is going to be just unprecedented in potential demand. You know, it's obviously there's going to be a lot of people who maybe not have tried marijuana who may try it, and just for the businesses that are in Canada, it's going to be unbelievable. Look what's going on in Colorado or Washington or Oregon here in the U.S. Several states down here still have it on the potential ballot coming up in November, but the answer is it's just only beginning. And, you know, down here in the States, there's some rumors that the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, may take marijuana off Schedule 1 this summer, and if not, Obama may do something before he leaves the White House. I mean, I just can't tell you. Some of these stocks are just going to literally explode. The question is, you know, do they have the business yet? Will it be just, you know, hype a little bit until they start generating revenues? So, you know, there's a lot of action. You know, the big blue chip stock that I've been trading, GW Pharmaceutical down here in the States, of course, they're a UK company. I mean, we had a real winner on that one just a few weeks ago. I don't know if you caught it or not, but this was a $130 stock that came down to like $40, and they came out with some story that the FDA had approved or was about to approve one of their drugs. It literally opened up 50 points the next morning into the 80s, went into the low 90s, and we were long for our clients. So, you know, when you see moves like that, I'm not saying we can repeat that every week, of course, but it just shows you the potential in this market. So to answer your question, it's just starting. You know, I know there's some pushback in some places because of the fear of marijuana getting into the wrong hands, particularly with children and the edibles situation. But, you know, this is a multi-year, possibly multi-decade situation, and you know, really the answer is we're early. I mean, this is only the beginning. There's a lot of disbelievers out there, and we just have to, you know, we have to rifle shot our opportunities into the right situations.
Well, as I said earlier, you know, I remember when you first brought this to my attention, and it hadn't even crossed my mind as the opportunity, and that was about. Really, it was a good 2 years before you started to hear about the legalization trend. In Canada, they promised legislation by next October. Mark, I'm not familiar what Schedule A is when you said maybe that will change in the States.
Well, on the Schedule 1 designation...
Oh, Schedule 1, I meant, sorry. Yeah,
it's illegal. I mean, basically, they say marijuana is just illegal, period. And, of course, many of the states here have passed legalization for medical use. And even so, it's illegal federally. So until they take it what they call the Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 or 3, which is a lower designation, you know, it's a crime. Theoretically, the feds could come in, even in a state like Arizona or Colorado, and just raid a place. But, you know, there's been assurances given by the Department of Justice in Washington and Obama that if the states have passed it, unless you've done something really, you know, way out criminally, you know, they're not going to go after you. And that's been pretty much the case. The people that have been arrested are people that are selling it illegally, so the feds aren't bothering you. But here's the problem. You know, the banking industry here in the U.S. doesn't want to take deposits from a federally illegal business. So there's a big problem here in terms of banking and people hoarding cash and all these funny stories you hear about in Colorado. There's all this cash in boxes because they can't put it in the banks. Some are buying real estate with the cash, doing, unfortunately, a little bit of money laundering in the process. So I guess if it gets off Schedule 1, then the banking industry will say, hey, this is not illegal anymore. We can take the money, and that's going to open up some big business for the banks, and it'll open a comfort level for people who are afraid to be doing business.
You know, it's fascinating. One of the things we talked about, as I say, several years ago is my feeling came from, again, economics and finance will trump politics, which is they can make a heck of a lot of money here. Governments are. They're already doing well in the states where it's legalized. That's why I see as an overwhelming impetus. And it's an example of a variable that can jump in there and change dynamics, because the estimates of how many billions of dollars are involved in this industry or could be potentially involved in the industry in terms of tax revenue, I think is enough motivation to get this thing done.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, Colorado revenues are skyrocketing for the government. So I agree. That's ultimately what will get the states involved. Remember, years ago, they were joking about the lottery. You know, that's not going to go anywhere. It started back in the 1970s, and every state has one now, and you have it in Canada, and it was immoral. The government shouldn't be involved in gambling. Well, ultimately, states are cleaning up on the lotteries, and this is just another example of it. But, you know, there's a whole other reason here, which got me interested, is the medical aspects of marijuana. I mean, this drug or plant's been around for 5,000 years. There has been a lot of research. Some showing improvements with cancer patients and neurological disorders. That's what GWPH is involved with, the GW pharmaceutical I mentioned earlier. So on that level, there's a lot of people, and I've gone to a lot of these conventions. You know, I've attended a lot of the conventions, the marijuana conventions in Vegas and other places. I joined a group called ArcView, which puts investors and marijuana, cannabis companies together, and I've just met dozens and dozens of people and heard stories, and it's just amazing. There is a medical benefit to this. So whether they recreationally approve it in Canada right away or if it happens here, there's still a strong medical benefit, and you should be aware of that.
There's so much to get to. I want to ask you about gold in a minute and ask you about the U.S. dollar, et cetera, but I want to just finish this off. You do something called the Vice newsletter that was just a clever title that really was originated with this thought of legalization of marijuana. You cover other things, though, like gambling and liquor and a whole bunch of stuff. I still want to focus, and I'll talk about the Vice newsletter in a second, but I want to focus just a touch more on this, that you do need a professional, I think, to look at these opportunities, because there's going to be a lot of fly-by-night companies, a lot of ones that necessarily have the kind of business infrastructure you need, and I suppose that's what you're looking at when you look at the Vice newsletter.
Absolutely.
in this area of it. Yeah.
Right. There's about 200-300 publicly traded marijuana-related companies. Some tell me there's 400. I haven't found the other 100 yet, and many are just, like you say, fly-by-night. They're public shells that have announced they're going into the business, a lot of hype, and there are a couple companies that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission down here, shut down this past week because of improper filings and so forth. But the real key for me is looking for companies that are actually generating revenue. So you have to look a little deeper. Many are penny stocks, unfortunately, but there are others that, like the GW. Another thing I can throw at you, a big name company you got to keep an eye on, and it's on our recommended list, is Philip Morris. I mean, they announced they just were acquiring some company in Israel in the marijuana business, and it was like an official statement that we're entering this industry. And I think you and I have joked about this in the past. I mean, the big players will get involved, and it will be, if it gets off Schedule 1 here in the States, you're going to hear names like, in fact, General Mills, GIS, the big cereal company. There's a big poster in Colorado about how you should be using marijuana with their cereals. I mean, it was just unbelievable when I saw this thing. So you got General Mills, Philip Morris coming into the space, which is not only going to legitimize it, but it's going to provide tremendous opportunity for investors.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, and that's what you deal with the Vice newsletter. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. I got to take a break, though, Mark. When we come back, I just have to hit on what you made of the overall market, couple of declines at the end of the week for the Dow. We've got to talk about gold as it sniffed around the $1,300 mark, and a little bit more about the U.S. dollar. So all of that coming your way. You're listening to Money Talks on the Money Talks Network. What did everybody hate this week? Well, you're about to find out. I'll share with you the business comment I did that garnered the most dislike / hate / I'm a complete idiot mail. Hey, we're just talking to Mark Leibovit here. Just so you know how we get the guests. I'll say I want somebody on because their track record, their integrity, quality of their work, and as someone who I think you should be exposed to. And then I have our people book them. And they never talk to Mark. I don't talk to Mark or the guests in advance. But I always say, can you get a deal for our people who listen? And the thing I just thought you'd be interested in the Vice newsletter, given how prominent the talk about legalization of marijuana is right now in our news. And depending which city you're in, there's even more talk about it because of municipal licensing. So we've got a deal. Mark doesn't even know this, but we've got a deal for the Vice newsletter. It's regularly $540 a year. Well, we've got a special subscription for the year at $59. And then we're throwing in the regularly $450 annual forecast model for 2016, because we said, hey, it's only got about 8 months left to run, so why don't we get that too? So I just want to let you know that. As I say, this is a sphere I think you have to be very careful of when you're investing. And that's why, I mean, personally, I don't have the expertise to look at 300 companies in this area. Mark looks at a broader scale, as I said. It might be into gambling also and some other things. But I just thought you might be interested in this. And I'm very pleased that Grant got a hell of a deal here with his people. So, Mark, I apologize for this. I know you weren't in part of that discussion, but we're giving the Vice newsletter away for $59, and you get a bonus of the annual forecast model. That's an 85% discount, by the way, in the Vice letter. But I think this is a fascinating area, and I promised I'll get to gold in a second, but I do think it's a fascinating area, as we both agree. This is the beginning of something. This isn't the end product. This is going to be a big industry. They already estimated, for example, in the province of British Columbia, the illegal industry was about $7 billion a year, the illegal industry. So it gives you a sense of how big this thing can get. But as I say, investors have got to be careful here. There's going to be a lot of fly-by-nights. If I wanted to do some money without much integrity, I'd just start a company and say it was the marijuana company, and I promise you I could sell stuff with it. Anyways, Mark, sorry, long-winded to say go to moneytalks.net. You can get your special offer on the Vice letter. Mark, let me change gears here for a second. I want to go to the overall market, just hit you with a couple of things very quickly. One, what did you make of the market action this week in the Dow, for example, when it had the big sharp down day? Recovered not as bad. It was a small down day yesterday after initially having pretty negative numbers.
Well, Mike, I've been on the sell signal here for about 4 or 5 weeks because I'm looking at distribution in the market, whether this is the beginning of a bear market or just the beginning of a nice 2-3 month shake like we saw into the August lows and the February lows. We're just going to have to measure that day to day, but we're short. We're in a position in all the inverse indexes. You can go back to the adage, sell may, go away. In the last few years, sometimes it starts in April. This past week, you saw some of the generals, the big name stocks, like Apple and Google and Microsoft breaking big on downside gaps on heavy volume. I mean, when that happens, that tells you something is really wrong. So we're, I don't know, we're going to be up Monday or Tuesday or whatever, but I think the trend's down here, and I would bet between now and June you're going to see lower prices, and then we'll just take it from there. And again, maybe just a big trading range. We go back down in the S&P down to the low to mid 1800s like we did in February and August, and come right back up again, which will provide some great trading opportunities. And we'll just have to make that decision if this is something more long term. You got a lot of stuff going on out there. The U.S. elections. You've got fear of negative interest rates. You've got there was even rumors of a possible dollar devaluation, which I don't think is really likely now. And of course, all the geopolitical events. So and then you got companies coming out with earnings estimates. They beat very low earnings estimates, so it was a little bit of a manipulation, I thought. But the big name stocks breaking the way they did, and the fact we got some negative volume, which is what I really tracked, told me to be careful here. So I'd stay out of the market until we saw a clear sign of a bottom here in the next several weeks.
I'm just going to fire some at you because, of course, you've also been Gold Market Timer of the Year. You've got the VR Silver newsletter and the Gold letter separately. So let me start with gold. As we say, sniffed around that $1,300 mark. I don't have an answer to the question, is this which I thought was a very expected correction to that strong down move. I don't really have numbers that tell me if it's something more than that.
I think we've begun a bigger move, Mike. I tend to be a little bit more of a gold bug, but some of the numbers that you're seeing here, look at the explosive move we've seen with some of the shares in the past few weeks. The big names like American Barrett going from a couple bucks a share up to the 20s. I mean, big money is flowing into it, devaluations around the world. I was looking for 1350, maybe 1400 by the end of the year, and here we almost approached 1300. So we're probably getting a little a little exuberant here, and maybe they'll blow off early next week, and then we'll go into a little bit of a correction there. So if you're long term, that's one thing. If you're trading, I wouldn't be chasing it right here. I hope for a little bit of a pullback, but I do have some core positions that I've held for some time, and I would have to say that I'm a bull. I just have to say, from a trading perspective, look for a bit of a pullback. So I think it's more than a short-term flash in the pan. I think this is the beginning of a 3-year move, and whether we're going to go back to all-time highs, it's too early to say. But I'd be a buyer on dips, so I'm gonna stay bullish.
Only got about 2 minutes here before I got to go, but I want to talk silver. I was kind of looking for a move into that 1850 range. We're getting awfully close. Again, I love the way you just divided that. What are traders thinking? What would an investor think?
Well, silver, I agree with you. I was looking for about that $18 level. This is a short-term trading target. So I guess if you're trading, you might be looking to sell some here in the $18 area. But, look, silver's come down from $49, down, all the way down to 13. I mean, the next big number is 23. So if we blow through this 18 level, that's the big number. And some of the little silver stocks have just been going crazy. Little First Majestic, which I know is related to the Canadian players, was a buck or two a share, got up to $10, $11. I mean, some of these silver stocks are really taking off. So I don't know. I mean, so it pulls back to 16 or something. I don't know if it's going to change trends, so you got to be careful in terms of what your timing and perspective is. I might sell some at 18, hoping I'd buy at 16, but I wouldn't sell all of it, because what if it goes to 23? So that's sort of the strategy you have to take.
I'm talking with Mark Leibovit, and you can find him at Leibovit, which is Leibovit, vrnewsletters.com, Leibovit, vrnewsletters.com. Mark, we got about 45 seconds. I want to just also, before we go, the U.S. dollar.
Down. I've been bearish on the new U.S. dollar for months. It's been frustrating because they keep upticking it, but I think the realization has come with deflation around the world and everything. Money is being printed like crazy, and that's why you're seeing gold and silver come back. Some of the tertiary economy starting to improve here a little bit. So I think the Fed also wants the dollar weaker because it was hurting earnings of some of the big companies. So I would say lower for the dollar. I don't know how much lower it's going to go, but it already took out a new relative low around 93. So the next big level is 88. So I would say down.
Great stuff as always, Mark. Pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you very much. And just as a reminder, vrtrader.com is another place to go versus the Leibovit VR newsletters. That might be a little easier for your listeners.
vrtrader.com.